I have my Diet Coke ready in light of whatever we're going to talk about tonight.
Nice. Yeah, I just went and made a cup of tea. I'm doing the forbidden evening caffeine right now. It's the only thing that's going to kind of keep me going and keep me semi not retarded throughout this discussion. As we kind of get near.
I went for a nice herbal uncaffeinated myself, actually, because I've been struggling with the sleep a little bit lately. But
well, that's understandable with a child.
Yeah, honestly, I can't even really complain though, because she's like out of the box. I think the next couple are going to be like the difficult ones, but out of the box, she's slept like 5 to 7 hours a night, which is like easy mode. But
with you saying out of the box, it's making me think about an unboxing video of like you just like opening up like, this is my baby here now. It's a great model.
I have a Funko baby.
Yeah. Good Lord. They're going to start doing those now. Funko babies pumping out of like fake surrogates.
I think under Project 2025, they're going to shutter Funko Pop as a company, actually.
God, I hope so, dude.
Common Trump W, I guess.
Dude, right. One of the many to come. We're going to win so much, we're going to get tired of winning. That's what I've been telling all my boys.
They're actually, that company's like within 20 minutes of my house. Like, really? They're like based in, Everett, Washington.
I knew this one's on you, soldier.
Well, no, exactly. If I see like military vehicles heading in that direction, I'll let you guys know. I'll have the scoop.
Yeah.
I knew someone that actually worked for them really briefly, and apparently that company is just like run like a fucking circus. Like it's a fucking mess.
I mean, dude, look at it. Of course it is. You think it's geniuses running that fucking company? It's just a bunch of retards that love Disney, dude.
Founded October 23rd, 1998. It's 26 years ago. Funko is a Zoomer company. First manufactured bobblehead was of the Big Boy restaurant mascot. Just casually reading the Wikipedia page, because I'm like, man, I really don't know anything about this company other than its permanent association with man children.
Yeah,
right. Wait, you're like our fact checker right now.
Yeah.
I wonder if they always had that like flat design since day one, or if that was a more recent question.
Thing. Well, the company was first sold in 2005, headed by CEO Cynthia Williams. Company's increased its scope of toy lines to licensing deals. So I don't know. I mean, I'd have to. There's probably some niche YouTuber celebrity with like 300,000 subs that is going to have an entire 2-hour documentary on the history of Funko Pops.
Yeah.
And it just makes you want to question everything about what you do as your online political podcasting career. You're just like, wow, if I really transitioned to just the most boring, inane consumerist shit imaginable, I'd really be raking in the money right now.
Yeah. Orders of magnitude better than what we're up to now. I saw this video, man, that one of my coworkers showed me of this dude that just has every single Mountain Dew flavor and edition bottle that's ever been put out since the very beginning of Mountain Dew. And he's got just entire walls of Mountain Dew and like all the cans that came out with their like collectible bottles and all the different flavors and different designs throughout the eras. And he's got millions of views on his TikToks and on his YouTube shorts where he just goes over them. And he just opens a new can every other day and tries it out.
I know that the obvious thing to say about that is like, imagine if he just like directed that towards something like that actually benefited literally anyone at all. But then like I say that as like I have just like thousands and thousands of hours in computer games that like I'm never getting back ever in my life. So
yeah, but that's war training for the upcoming world struggle that's coming up.
Yeah, when we're fighting in a civil war and they need someone to make fucking Minecraft blockhouses.
Hit the mines.
It's the meme about the revolution. I thought after the revolution, I thought I was going to be a poet. And it's like, make the fucking Minecraft house. It's just.
Now I just got a square head. What the fuck?
I was gonna do Funko Pop designs after the revolution. Punch the fucking tree.
Oh man, I mean, we might be headed towards some sort of Minecraftian kind of techno future. Anyhow,
Minecraftian. If there's one word to describe Trump 2024. It's going to be Minecraftian.
Yeah, that's the new like Gamergate lingo. Instead of Gamergate, it's Minecraftian.
Notch is going to be part of the
Wouldn't
the
he make a
cabinet.
great White House press secretary? Just like anytime that he doesn't have some blonde, large-breasted woman up on the stage, it's just Notch just dropping the gamer word with any reporter that comes his way.
It's just this like fat, bald Swedish autist who's just like talking about just like demographic data. And then they're just like, yeah, now you're gonna fucking appreciate when we put the like Fox News blondes up there. So shut the fuck up.
Dude, alternating back and forth like good cop, bad cop would be pretty effective, I think.
That kind of feels like what the Biden administration has done with these broads. It's
They had
like
that one redheaded broad that looked crazy, dude.
That was good cop.
Yeah, then they brought the black lady.
How good we had it.
Yeah, then she brings the black lady. She's like, all right, now time to get down to business.
Was that your black lady impression?
Yeah. Fuck. Yeah, you caught me.
You didn't want to listen to the ice cream, man. We're going to bring out the black lesbian now. It's over for you boys.
Dude, nothing has made me believe that COH has dated a black girl more than him just going, now we got to get down to business.
Oh, God. You don't know how true that is, Slav. Jesus Christ.
Dude, the Southern gentlemen know, all right?
I mean, that's just what I was around in my day, dude. That's just for the demographics I was working with.
Oh, my gosh.
But, yeah, that brings us to, demographics change, there's going to be possibly some...
This segue.
It's a nice pivot there.
That had the hardest segue, like your average 1488 Twitter poster on .com. It's just like, well, speaking of black people, and it's just like, I know where this is going. I've seen this before.
Oh, I might actually pivot this into a different direction. We're not going to go black. We're going to go brown. We're going to talk about the upcoming possible demographic change that may be immigration reform, mass deportations. That looks like that's kind of on the... I mean, it's definitely on the order of the day, it seems. It seems as though that's kind of going to be number one on the list of what's to be done once Trump really gets in office and gets things going.
Well, and I think I was talking about this, like, am I correct in assuming, I mean, just, bouncing it off you guys, am I correct in assuming that this kind of necessarily has to be, like, more or less a day one thing? Because I don't really know how else you feasibly, like, do the mass deportation. Like, I don't think you put that on the back burner for the first couple months. I think you kind of have to just strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, I think that it has to be a day one policy. I mean, and it's made it very clear from Trump and his campaign and his spokespeople that that's going to be what comes. Is day one action, and that there's going to be some either state of emergency or they're going to just take, the necessary military action to do so. And it's sort of a requirement. It just has to happen. Otherwise, you're never going to see that take place. And already putting on, what was his job in the first Trump administration? Like assistant or deputy ICE director. And everyone saw the clip going around where he's like, families can be deported together. And it's just, after saying based like 20 times under my breath, I'm just like, well, now the real question is that even remotely feasible without kinetic action? And I don't mean that in the like, Civil War type deal. No, what I mean is the same thing that we saw in the first Trump administration, where there were people shooting at, ICE detention centers or other federal buildings, especially, of course, in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, like, there are John Brown gun clubs and socialist anarchities that I'm sure would love to get the chance. But I think that once it gets into action, the real kinetic aspect won't be between white liberals. It'll be between ethnic gangs and mafias that would like to keep the grift going.
Yeah. Well, I think especially with like the idea that we're like more or less just going to invade Mexico being a pretty realistic thing, I tend to agree with you. I do think outside of the conflict aspect of it, though, one thing that I've been kind of thinking about is it's kind of for obvious reason, I guess, kind of the most like ready at hand critique of such a proposition from most liberals. adults in the room who are just trying to be reasonable claim that it's just not logistically feasible, the mass deportations. And excuse me, it's that tea going down. I remember we talked to Glenn from Rare Candy last time I spoke to him at least, and he had kind of mentioned the idea of the way you do this really is to enforce laws on employers and landlords, and then really the formal show of strength deportations are for criminals. I mean, how realistic do you think that is? I tend to think that is the case, especially just because I think that there's just going to be like really a lot of really bad photo ops with just paddy wagons rounding people up. And I think, I think if you literally just enforce on fucking employers, no, you can't be hiring these fucking people. I think it works itself out. I'm curious. I wish I could
give credit to the Twitter poster who wrote this, but he had said, listen, about 75% of all of our problems could be solved by just actually enforcing the laws on the books.
Yes.
Right. And if you went from there, the minor reforms or the bad apples that you need to get rid of are going to make themselves noticeable very quickly. And you've noticed this throughout 23 and throughout this election cycle, and they've already, grandstanded that they're going to make their cities or their states sanctuary cities or sanctuary states for illegals and the undocumented Americans, very much making themselves saying that we're prioritizing these masses of people who shouldn't be here over American citizens, which in any book, in any time prior to 70, that would have been considered a traitorous action, and you should have been deposed judicially or extrajudicially by your own citizens. But I think that he's probably right. Glenn's right. But on top of that, I think the way that you also do it is that you just start taxing remittances. No, there's no point to come here to work illegally with whatever wages you're making or whoever stolen identity that you have, a social security card or whatever, if Uncle Sam takes 75 or even 99% of whatever you want to send back to your home country. There's no point in you being here if Uncle Sam's going to take that big of a cut. Now, how much of that can be done unilaterally is a whole other question. But again, I think that he's going to have to take action on it because that's what he campaigned on. It would be a huge blow to his promises. And I think that just out of the basic necessity of the United States to function as a country, period, it needs to happen. I think that the reason why you saw such a vibe shift among tech leaders and other businesses, and even Jeff fucking Bezos of all people, the basic question of, is America capable of even maintaining basic civilizational standards of law and order, business, some kind of semblance of trust or contract law? Is any of that maintainable? And obviously, over the last 4 years, the question is a big fucking no. I mean, we had pictures and photos and videos of all these trains leaving Los Angeles, these freight trains, and it's just hordes of people just trying to open the train and go through Amazon boxes. You've noticed this with rampant anarcho-tyranny with district attorneys that are, either Soros funded or others, and to witness just the opening of the floodgates. Everyone likes to say this, and a Canadian content creator by the name of Endeavor had said it. He says, woke is, we're living in 1984. Bespoke is a brave new world. And it's like, the real truth is that you're living in the camp of the saints. And I think that's just blatantly obvious. And one last thing on that was that a couple months ago, I sat down in Dallas to go watch this debate hosted by the odious Barry Weiss about immigration. And it was awful. It was really awful. And it was so bad that the most well-spoken person there was Sora Bamari, the wonderful race communist who just would love to suck the cock of Cesar Chavez. But Barry Weiss asked the question. She said, well, what book would you recommend people to read on this subject? And then Ann Coulter raises her skinny, scaly white hand up, and she's just like, well, I think that you should read The Camp of the Saints, because that's an actual banned book. And I'm like, bravo, sister, just preach. And I'm sitting there with my drink in my hand with my best friend, and we're just like, this is such a good time. And then we realize we're surrounded by a bunch of liberal activists, and we're like, oh no, Hans, I think we're the bad guys here.
Noticing the skulls on your caps in that moment. Yeah, I mean, how honestly, it's been such a flurry since the election in general that we've kind of just been like talking in such broad strokes, but like I'm kind of interested, like COH, how, because I want to ask you. This is like the worst interview form ever. I'm just going to ask my co-host, but like how feasible do you think the goal is? Because that is the framing of the issue now. And for my own part in it, I think it's a little bit dishonest after we just had a few years ago, the state governments just kind of roll out and just put everyone on fucking house arrest and just ruin all of our fucking lives. So I kind of have a hard time being sold on the idea that it's not feasible. But I mean, what does that look like in your mind? Because again, the fun aspect of it is we can make the call now while we have the opportunity to, because I do think if this is ever going to get going, not to repeat myself, it's going to be pretty much immediately, because I think there's going to be a big approval rating tax that comes from this. I think there's going to be a ding. And I think you have to do it at the high water mark. And that's what this is.
I mean, I think that it was obviously a very big part of his campaign, and it's what most of his voter base responded to. I think that you kind of have to start delivering on that in day one from that perspective, but also because it's just, in order to have the time to get it done, you got to start early. And if you push it off until later in the term, I mean, you're going to be looking at less and less time to get it done. And these are big numbers we're talking about. But I definitely think that, like, the approach that Glenn's talking about, like, just, being strict and enforcing the actual laws on the book and attacking these things from, like, the side of the employers, the side of the landlords, the people who are offering services to these people and stuff. If you can shut that down and they don't have as many services and stuff, they have no reason to kind of be here. If you're able to make it so they're not actually getting the jobs and they're not actually able to be hired over American workers, then they have no reason to be here. And there is like a, self-selection where they kind of will either become just like violent criminals and stuff like that because they have to, and then they kind of make themselves known and you kind of get rid of them that way, or they'll just kind of send themselves out. I think it's feasible. I think that it's feasible through a matrix of different things. I think that it's not going to be, just rounding every single one up by force and driving them down to the border. I think it's going to be a number of different things, like looking at, the back end of things, as well as possibly even, assessing who are some of the people who have been here so long that it's like, maybe you just go ahead and get some path towards citizenship for some of those people. Maybe that's the matrix that it takes to get some of this handled in a meaningful way, while you're like I think there's going to be a triage that's going to be happening. And I think that because of that, it can be done. I think that, like, what I've been hearing from a lot of liberal friends of mine is like, I mean, there's just not money in the budget for this kind of stuff, about not just about immigration, but about like some of the reforms they're talking about, with like agriculture and with the food stuff RFK is talking about. And my answer is that the money is, they'll just print money. The money is not an issue. If there's political will for something to be done, it will be done. We're sending money off to fund wars all over the world. We have the manpower to do the things we need done. If there's political will, and the people who are actually going to pull the levers of power to do that, it will be done. Now, how much kickback he gets and how much stuff stands in his way, as far as like sanctuary cities and stuff like that, and these states and things like that, and not wanting to really trample on states' rights in that capacity, because that's something he's been pretty open about, is supporting states' rights, at least from the abortion standpoint. So I kind of wonder exactly how that'll work out from like a federal and state level. I think that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to look at mostly. But
I think the answer to that from him is just fuck him. Like, I think there has to be examples where you just go, this isn't a legitimate position you can have. Sorry.
Yeah,
because like what Prudentialist said, like, it's just that, like, you need to enforce the fucking law, and it gets. I think that's one of the strengths. And honestly, this is something I'd love to hear your, both of your guys' input on. But I think the strength right now on the right is a really clear, like a really strong clarity of messaging. And I think that is a really big strength. And just sorry, you have to enforce the fucking law is a really, really straightforward, clear message.
I mean, people supported orders on like strengthening the rule of law in these states that would be like sanctuary states, like California and stuff, done a bunch of ballot measures. So I think that the, like, standing the party line and kind of being like, we're going to stand out and be like essentially what Prudentialist was saying, you're going to support these people who are undocumented, aren't even a part of the like citizenry. You're going to support them over the actual citizens that make this country run and who are your actual constituents. It doesn't seem like that's a winning message in the long term at all.
Yeah, not to mention that it's an overwhelmingly popular position. I mean, polling data, you can say, whatever about it with regards to its metrics or how it's done, methodology and whatever. But even throughout the election cycle, both against Biden and against Kamala, I mean, even an overwhelming percentage of Democrats had came out and said that, deportations are kind of a necessity at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've seen, I mean, this has been the beauty for me, and maybe to bring it back to broad strokes, because witnessing all of these, I mean, there's the whole meme about putting libtards into crystals, which is like, whatever. I mean, it's funny. But the actual crystallization, like the self-imposed crystals that libs have put themselves in, is their inability to question their own political orthodoxy.
Yeah.
There was, I think it was Travis County, Texas, I think had stepped down. I'm going to make sure as I like real-time fact check myself. Where he had basically said that, what we need to do is to like seriously begin to examine our positions, our messaging on, certain issues about transgenderism or immigration. And he had gotten hounded by the extremists in his own party to where he had basically just had to like lose his job within 72 hours and had been kicked out. And I mean, this is the thing about how the Democratic Party, and by a large extent, just sort of liberal orthodoxies are, is that you can have different takes on the economy. You can be a class reductionist. You can be a commie. You can be like a reformed neoliberal. But if you question things about like how special black people are, or racism, or transgender issues, or how important it is that like millions of people from fucking Haiti come here to eat your cat, then like you're gone the next day. And so you can joke about, Will Stancil gets like 10,000 years in the crystal, but it's like no. These people have fundamentally decided that these sort of confessions, these creedal faith statements of liberal orthodoxy are more important than actual bread and butter issues that were voted for in large numbers. I mean, there are counties in Texas that have never voted Republican that are like 95% Tejano, or like 95% Hispanic to some extent. And they were like, no, this Trump guy makes more sense. And I mean, one, it has a lot to do with the fact that, the newest immigrant group always wants to be the last one off the boat to pull the plank behind them and say, screw you to the rest of the people getting on board. It's just a fundamental truth. But at the same time, it's an unsustainability factor, because every place that these people get ported into is makes safety almost impossible. It makes any sort of political sovereignty all but impossible. And I mean, everyone from Robert Putnam to any basic study on civic participation is the more diverse it gets, the less likely you are to engage in civic society, because now it just becomes a game about demographics and ethnic warfare. This is why every New York City mayoral election is just a racial census based upon which vote gets the highest number of their respective in-group. And you saw that with Mayor Adams. You saw this with every other election that's happened in the United States in major metropolitan areas. And it's going to continue to be that way for some considerable time. And I don't think Democrats are, at least right now, this is all subject to change, because I'm sure eventually someone will pull their head out of their ass and come up with a decent take. But until then, at least on the national level, there's this big, how could we be wrong? We're on the right side of history. We're the ones that are going to usher in this millenarian style utopia where we will have our solar punk Chobani commercial where there's no white people and we're all just picking fruits with our robots. And it's like, we will achieve this. And it's like, well, obviously not, because like you failed to stop Hitler twice and the glass ceiling remains intact. Thank God. And so it's just like, well, what do we do now? And it's like, well, I think we should double down. And I'm like, please double down.
Yeah, keep doing
the more you keep acting retarded, the more it helps me appear to be sane, moderate, centrist, which I absolutely am. I have totally moderate and sensible centrist opinions. And that
for anyone that's listening,
these people just need to fucking go, and we need to like start fixing some things at home first. I mean, it was a real vibe shift when you saw at the Republican National Convention that fucking JD Vance gets introduced with an anti-war song from, what was it,
Yeah.
Merle Haggard? You know, it's just like, wow. Like, imagine showing George W. Bush, like, 2004 RNC convention, hey, in about 20 years' time, everything that you stand for is about to be morally repudiated by
Yeah.
some billionaire from New York and some, like, hick-lib turned, you know, right-wing venture capitalist. And after that, you are going to be consigned to the dustbin of history. See ya! You know, it's like, that's crazy. And this is the first time in 20 years Republicans have won the popular votes. The first time in 20 years that, you know, states that George W. Bush took for granted are finally back in Republican hands. And so it's like, wow, things have finally gotten into a position where, regardless of libs, you know, self-flagellating or being, actually about the popular vote or the system or whatever, it's that, no, 4 years of the most insane bullshit after some really shady and conspicuous circumstances.
Fortifying.
Fortification, you know, it was other things, but yeah, we'll go with that. It's like my bicycle being stolen off of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. I can't say what happened to it, but everyone knows.
Yeah.
We all know. We all know, you know. And so with that being said, it's just they have put themselves in this conceptual prison in which they can't escape from right now. Eventually they'll get out of it, I think. But the question really does become, okay, the Democrats I'm not worried about. It's about intelligence community, it's about bureaucrats, and it's about these governors that do, legally speaking, have power to resist it. But I think that it's no longer just a question about the will of the people. It's a question about, well, do you actually have the will to do the things that might look unoptical?
That's that, and that is, at the end of the day, you whittle everything down. That is the real question for me with the immigration stuff, right? Is like what's the optics hit that is worth it? You know what I mean? Or how far in that direction is are people willing to go? It's funny. There was a lot there that you just shared, but it kind of, one thing it kind of reminded me of is you know, just this idea of like, you know, I don't think the left is so much like collapsing under the weight of their own internal contradictions. They're like being pressed from all angles into a smaller and smaller little cube in a fucking black hole. And it's always it reminds me, God, there was this old post by fucking, dude, this is going way back in Fed Post history, Drew, that was like, hey, this is the dirtbag left, dude. We're leftists, but we're cool. We're not uptight. You can say whatever you want, except that or that or that. You can't say that, and don't say that, right? And it's just that. And I'm far from the first person.
I know you guys really aren't on Twitter as much as y'all used to be, but I mean, there was this great tweet that someone had said after the election. They're like, "Well, we need like a left-wing Joe Rogan," and then someone went apoplectic, and they were like, "We had that, and it was called Chapo Trap House, and it was the worst racist, sexist, misogynist, transphobic thing ever." And I'm like, all you guys were doing were just being like a bunch of like quirked up white boys who were for Bernie, who could say the word retard or faggot. Like, there wasn't anything wrong with that. But apparently it's too far gone, and it's irrecoverable or irretrievable to like the left-wing standards, because as much as it feels so like, I don't know, Charlie Kirk to say, but like, no, really, Caligula's horse is at the front end of this party, and everyone has to deal with this horse's ass of like nonsense that is running things. And so now it's like, okay, the dog and pony show for all intents and purposes is over. The real question is going to be, no, you do still have some very serious evil people in government. What are you actually going to do about it? Because the first problem we saw with Trump in his first administration was that he had clearly no idea what he was dealing with. Yeah. He had a very short bench and roster to work with to find people to actually work with his administration. You had Mark Milley and, Mad Dog Mattis or whatever, like kind of cooperating, inspiring against the president of the United States. And so it's like, okay, are you willing to do things that would make you look like a dictator to actually correct that problem? And my gut tells me that Trump doesn't want to do that. Trump doesn't want to be seen as like the bad guy. But I mean, for anyone who I think left or right, I mean, mainly, I think the right wingers already kind of know what time it is. And even for people who are finally beginning to feel it in their wallets or their sense of safety or wherever they live, it's like, no, I think something really transformative needs to take place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, here's my thing. I think that the first term, it was very evident that he didn't know what he was up against. He didn't know like the depths of how like he knew about the deep state and whatnot, but he didn't really know about like the depths they were willing to go to in order to actually like impede upon his progress and ability to do anything, and even like infringe upon his life. And I think that this time around, it seems as though that's kind of on the forefront. He's been picking people for his cabinet that definitely seem to me more so like just Trump loyalists, people who were in the MAGA camp primarily more so than he did in 2016. And I think that like the failure of 2020, the things that worked against him in that moment, and kind of some of the fallout from that informed a lot of his decisions going into this, as far as the transition team and as far as the cabinet appointments. And it does seem as though uh, he's at least conscious of the fact that like that was a big problem in his previous term, and in this term he's trying to get that right, as far as not surrounding himself with so many swamp people, and getting people who are going to be more, at least a little bit more sympathetic towards his actual agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying this the other day. I think, okay, the election is over, right? The election's over. Now the actual interesting thing, and you see this online, now the actual interesting conflict can really come about, which is, and I really want to hear the Prudentialist's point on this, because, or your thoughts on this, because I have my own view of this, and I'm a little bit later to the party, right? Which is, now it's going to be factions within the right basically trying to grab the wheel and steer the ship, right? And it's going to be, the real conflict is which of these factions kind of comes out on top, and then I guess leftoids are just going to be like on the front lawn of the White House setting themselves on fire in the meantime or something. I mean, they don't even have the tools to understand the dynamic that I even just laid out. They don't understand that there's any difference between elements of like the PayPal crew, PayPal mafia kind of people, and Christian nationalism and things like that. My view of the landscape, for the most part, and this is very difficult, and I think it's kind of like a putting tracks down as the train is moving, kind of trying to articulate what I think the factions at play are. But I think it's basically, you have the neoconservatives, obviously, that's the easy one. You have kind of the tech people, right? You have Christian nationalists, and you have what I kind of consider to be like a postmodern right, which is a little bit more syncretistic. And that's my view of it. I could totally be wrong, but I'm like, I think that this is where the real meat is on the bone. And I'm like interested what your thoughts are. If you think I'm totally wrong about those factions that I laid out, what, if you do agree, like what group you're betting on, what horse you're betting on, that kind of thing.
Oh man, it's funny. I just spent, and I don't know when this podcast will come out, but it'll be out. Hopefully, this video I have will be out before then, so I can tell people to go watch that and maybe get some of my thoughts on it. Is that you have to seriously consider the history of just conservatism in America in its pre-war and post-war context. What is colloquially known as the old right was this bizarre mix of social conservatives, Christian conservatives, libertarian types, as well as sort of laissez-faire, but also kind of these filibustering interventionist types. I mean, it ranged from everything from Garrett Garrett to Alfred J. Nock to H.L. Mencken to Ayn Rand to various senators and House of Representatives congressmen as well during the 1920s and 30s who were adamantly against the growth of FDR and the administrative state that came with it. And of course, that sort of collection and coalition dies by the end of World War II, both due to old age, but also a lack of institutional control. And this is what kind of gives rise to what was known as the New Right of the 1960s, in the same way there was this New Left of the 60s and 70s as well. I mean, this is where your Buckleys of the world really emerge. And they start red baiting, and they also start kicking out anyone that, isn't really willing to play ball on this issue. So, I mean, I had Buckley writing things like In Search of Anti-Semitism, trying to gauge as much as what they can before they get kicked out. And I mean, don't get me wrong, National Review allowed some wild essays to get written during Buckley's time, but once you started pushing too hard on certain issues, you were more or less gone. And that's still certainly up the case today, where even John Derbyshire, I think it was 2012, when he got kicked out of National Review for having a a piece on the talk, but from like the white people's perspective. And I mean, it's a great essay. But and on top of that, towards the Reagan Revolution in the 1980s, you also had a hard branch of paleo-conservatives. I mean, this was like people like Bob Whitaker, Sam Francis, and countless others that, by all intents and purposes, are sort of the people that many people in the online right take for granted in terms of their thought process of their memes and ideas. People like Joe Sobran as well, and they lose out to neoconservatives, of course, because once there's an election, everyone's fighting for jobs and everyone's fighting for the ideological direction of the party. Now, Trump does not have command of the Republican Party whatsoever. I think that's abundantly clear. You have MAGA conservatives, or these sort of further to the right wings of the Republican Party that are with Trump, but there's still a very much establishment faction that has the power, it has the money, and it has a donor class that is far willing to go on board with whatever the mainline GOP was. And I mean, this means that, 2020, for all intents and purposes, for everything that took place there was also a colossal, fuck you to Trump from Mitch McConnell. I mean, millions of dollars to keep fucking Lisa Murkowski in Alaska and to pull money away from the Blake Masters race in Arizona, which he probably could have won if he had more money. And so it just comes to show that, no, there's still a very open civil war inside of the Republican Party and those factions. As for the horse I'm betting on, I think the question is going to become is how active does Elon Musk want to stay in government? Now, he's got the whole Doge thing, which, as a total aside, Elon Musk will be written down by biographers as one of the greatest market manipulators of our time.
yeah, that's true.
Definitely.
Someone needs to write, like, if there's an Art of a Deal 2, it needs to be about, like, Elon Musk and the art of the meme. Because it's just like, congratulations, you've now created this like quasi-governmental, like bureaucratic austerity machine, but at the same time you've also pumped your shitcoin to the moon. Like, I'm so impressed. I tip my hat to this African-American genius. It's a real hustler's guide to, gotta get it down. But overall, I think that with these factions, it depends on how much Musk wants to play with it. And he's said with his America PAC that he will, primary and do things to keep people from detracting from Trump's agenda, which I think is good when you have the world's richest man and one of the largest federal, sort of like contractors with SpaceX and things, NASA and the military. That's a pretty big deal. But at the same time, I think that it's really going to come down to whether or not Trump wants to actually play ball. And I think that he's sort of signaled with Mike Johnson and Senator John Thune, the newly elected Senate Majority Leader for the Republicans, to replace Mitch McConnell, that, he's a total swamp creature. So, it depends, because Trump's biggest flaw is that when people flatter him, he tends to give them some leeway. And we saw how that played out in the first administration. But I think that, he did hire, or he's announced that I think was it Russ Vought, the guy behind Project 2025, is actually joining his administration. So, that's concerning, because there's some Heritage Foundation shit in that 930 some odd page document I really don't like. And I know that there's some stuff in there that that I know lefties aren't going to like. But there's some stuff in there that makes pretty damn good common sense. But that's the problem with any 930 page government manifesto document. Like, there's gonna be some piles of shit in there, and there's some diamonds that have been saved in there, like nuggets of corn after a long day of eating soup. But at the end of it all, I don't know if I can safely say whose horse I'm betting on, because we're recording this, 2 weeks and some change after the election. He hasn't been inaugurated yet, and we don't know what his first 100 days are going to look like. And on top of all this, we know that the OMB is trying to, get all this money spent and everything like that to make sure that, unlike Lisa Simpson in that one episode, it's like, well, we've inherited a terrible deficit from the Trump administration. It's like, no, Trump's going to walk in there, be broke. There's going to be all this shit and booby traps that are laid in that are going to prevent him, or trying their best to prevent him, to, get his agenda done without looking like a dictator. And I know that he's campaigning saying, I'll be dictator for a day. And it's like, well, I hope you do, because if not, you're going to get bogged down. But I do know that these fights have happened in the past. The difference is that you have the world's richest man and shit poster in your corner, who happens to own one of the most well-regarded social media sites on earth, where everyone goes for their talking points, because some person's shit post will be literally a debate talking point later that evening. Crazy. The Springfield, Ohio thing started by a mutual Twitter friend of mine, and it got mentioned at the debate stage because of how much generated talk it got in the matter of a couple of days about Springfield, Ohio. So, I think that that fact.
Wait, but hold on. Elon Musk doesn't own Blue Sky. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, that hug box of faggots. I saw that. What's his name? Perry, Abacles, the Chicago shitposter lawyer Greek guy. Apparently, he got banned from Blue Sky because he says, "I'm not gay. I just like the word scrotum." And it was like user was banned for this post, like it was 4chan, and it's just like, "Oh, Jack Dorsey, what happened to you, honey? Like, what happened, Jack? Jack, what happened? Wake up, Jack Dorsey. Wake up, Joe Biden. Like, wake up." But on top of all these things, to just sort of quickly wrap up my point, I think that the faction that Trump has is aiming for this. I think it's very, very much influenced by what's known as the Californian ideology, for starters. But secondly, that it has a huge chance to be a little more coordinated, because I think Musk wants to win, because Musk wants to, one, not be in jail, B, make money, and C, go to Mars. And you're going to back the horse that allows you to do that. And I think Trump is the best bet that has that happen. However, the GOP, if Trump wins, is going to be far more liberal on social issues, but will be like, I don't know, 15% more nativist in rhetoric. So it's going to be a weird, when all those like GOP guys from 2012 were like, well, we need to be like the multi-ethnic working class party that appeals to people. So, these home pocketbook issues win. I was like, well, you finally got that under Donald Trump. And it's now going to be a question of, are you really going to be satisfied with that when major parts of your coalition either lib out or you ignore them? And because, again, like all this focus for the Trump Spock's people and everything like that is just like, well, we love everyone who like came on board and came and vote, these low propensity voters and whatnot, but they can't thank their core demographic of voters, which is white people.
Right. Well, and you also obviously run into a strategic issue with the multi-ethnic thing that the left has had, which is, if it's all just race-based patronage, which I think might be a little bit dramatic to put on the Republicans right now, but it just becomes a circular firing line, right? I mean, that's why I think, at least in a cultural capacity, the like Kamala's for they them ended up fucking killing as much as it did, right? Is because like, that shit fucking scares people. That shit, black people don't like the rainbow people, right?
Yeah.
And the Mexicans don't like the illegal immigrants. And there's this fucking matrix where it's very hard to know what works in the meta that won't alienate a different leg of the stool. And again, like, yeah, if you're doing all these all this lip service to everyone except for your bread and butter,
liberal theodicy is what you're trying to accomplish, is you're like cutting at the leg of the stool to get your answer. It's the classic theodicy question about God's omnipotence, and omnipresence and all that, and still being good with evil existing in the world. I mean, the thing, this is also what killed it, and you have to mention it, which is October 7th. Because, Kamala Harris had the overwhelming amount of Jewish money pouring into her campaign. Sorry if I'm sounding edgy. I'm just stating plain facts. I'm not like trying to like dive in and get into any like weird, particularly deep end questions or things like that. But I mean, like, that was the case. And you had
in
the identity, the identity politics of all that kind of came in. And this is why I think that there's going to be this resurgence of neoconservatism, or it'll be like anti-woke neoconservatism. Because I mean, if you read Beautiful Losers, essays on American conservatism by Samuel Francis, he'll tell you that, and that book came out in the 90s, like 93. He'll tell you that, like, the top 25 most influential conservatives on this cover from like 1945 to like 1975, most of them are like Roman Catholic, most of them are German, most of them are Jewish. The few that were there either converted to Catholicism. So very few of like the waspy Anglo-Saxon European heritage of like Americans were actually represented in the conservative movement post-war. And I mean, that still very much is the case, because like you look at the heroes or the great intellectual giants of post-war conservatism, it's so de-anglicized, but and also it's very Jewish in that respect too. I mean, and not to say that that's a bad thing, because I mean, there's some really great work done by Jewish conservatives. I mean, Paul Gottfried is one of the greatest writers and political thinkers of the last 30 years alone. But on top of that, the neoconservatives like to say, well, we were liberals who were mugged by reality. So what you have is like a cavalcade of rich, well-to-do Jews in like Manhattan and New York and all these other places in college towns where they're like, whoa, wait a second, all this anti-white rhetoric is coming our way, and like that's not cool. And so like Bill Ackman and the Chris Rufos of the world with the Manhattan Institute, and I mean Manhattan's a huge intelligentsia like center point, which is what Francis writes about. And so it's just like, okay, they're here and now they're on this side of things. And so, and every time that, new factions or ethnic blocs move into a particular coalition, the old demographic of that coalition always has to cater to their needs, because you want to keep them on your side, and you want to keep the faction going, and you want the coalition to work because you want to win the election. And so how do you pay lip service to all that while also knowing that, these guys are all still huge liberals, and, not just like little L liberals, but like big L liberals. I mean, like they voted for Democrats in the past. They've, they still have money making millions of dollars off progressive causes. And it's not as if that stuff's going away anytime soon, because all of the stuff of progressivism, DEI and whatnot has been enshrined into law. It's not going away anytime soon. And unless that gets dismantled from the top down, then it's, there's still going to be reasons to do it. I mean, if it was truly, not the way of the quote unquote future, that's where the money was, fucking Jaguar wouldn't be making like the gayest ad imaginable right now. But the problem that Dems had, of course, is that, oh crap, the wealthy people that tend to give us our campaign dollars still want us to win, but we're also campaigning on issues that are not particularly appealing, like being, like a lot of our young Democratic activists are all pro-Palestine, and that, we have to walk this fine line to be like, well, we have to respect human rights, but like Israel, you need to do what you gotta do. And that is a very hard balance to walk, on top of the fact that like black guys aren't going to vote for this like woman who doesn't identify as black. Or I mean, even when she tries to, right, she had like that like little interview after she became the nominee, and she's got all these records of like Miles Davis or whatever, and it's just, it was a white woman running this campaign, and like a white liberal millennial woman saying like, well, this is how I would appeal to black guys. And it's just like, well, that's a terrible way to appeal to black people. But on top of that, you have this serene issue where the coalition for Democrats has always been, at least as long as I've been alive, and especially since what we would call, I guess, the Great Awakening since 2012, has been to always make sure that your target is on the white guy. It is on this, this idea that if you don't vote for me, we're going to go back to 1950. You're going to be in the back of the bus, and nothing's going to be as good as it once did, because the gravy train will stop, and you're on your own, which means no more Gibbs, no more systems, no more patronage, etc. No more jobs at the DMV where you can take a 45-minute break to screw the guy who's trying to get his license renewed.
Yeah.
Because those job programs, which they are, I mean, they're all just Gibbs. It's all forms of entitlement. They disappear. And so now that you have a coalition that is sort of fractured, and it's not really fractured, I mean, they still hate white people, but the thing is that the culture that has been created out of all this, whether it be the great shadow of Barack Obama, the Dear Colleague letter, all of this insane shit on how to date and to be, we've basically, we're trying to almost to set up as if our politics are trying to move towards this, great sexual speciation where men are Republican or they vote conservative and women are total libtards. And I mean, that's terrible for like the civilizational health of a country, or really any civilization, but it just illustrates that the cracks are very apparent. And this is why that if we need to keep the machine going, and I don't mean just the party, but I mean the entitlement spending, the amounts of welfare, the amounts of trade, the amounts of cheap labor with immigration, we have to just look a blind eye to some of these weird orthodoxies. Because, like, I know you don't think that trans women are women. Obviously, that chick's got a 5 o'clock shadow. But we need to make sure that you and I keep making our money, because we don't know how long we're going to be in office. So we need to get going while the going's good. And for now, they're out of office. But that's not, the system is still in place. And I think that becomes the big issue about coalition building or working with either the left or the right, is how do you keep that together? And I think for Trump, there was a New York Times article that came out during the election cycle where it was like, Donald Trump's theory of everything is it all has to do with immigrants. And it's like, well, yeah, duh. But on top of that, like all the second order effects of immigration are being felt fucking everywhere. It doesn't matter if you live in the middle of nowhere like me, or if you live in New York City. It's all present and available because we have fundamentally decided decided that this country is not a country, it has no history, all of its idols are being burnt down, and we have a media complex that says if you want to be an American, okay, we have this whole great movie about McDonald's called The Founder. We have this movie that's a biography of Flaming Hot Cheetos. We've got a movie that's dedicated to like worshiping Michael Jordan and the fucking Air Jordans, like biography on Amazon. Like that's American culture. And that's it.
Yeah.
And so you've deracinated the country into this great big economic zone with regional consumer identities. And now everyone's realizing, oh, wow, life really fucking sucks. And so what do we do? And this is why Democrats are pondering, like, wow, we lost young men, not just young white men, but like a lot of young men of non-white origin. And that has to raise some serious questions if I were a Democratic strategist. But I mean, Dems don't have to really worry all that much because unless mass deportations happen and unless Trump manages to get, I don't know, a healthy above replacement rate TFR for white people, Democrats just have to wait out the clock.
Yeah, it kind of seems like this whole past election was like you're talking about him losing young men. It seems like the left in general and the Dems and kind of the mainstream as far as media and political pundits go had a general inability to describe our current political and economic state, and that comes down to also just misunderstanding factions within and misrepresenting factions within dissenting political groups. And so you take all these different dissenting things and you say, oh well, they're all just like this like Nazi, they're all like this one thing over there. And it kind of makes it to where, like, through dismissing all those things, you kind of just create people go, okay, well, whatever. I guess I am one of these things over here. You're obviously not able to actually like tell me about what's going on around me. You're not providing a coherent, understandable matrix of like charting out the forces that are going around in life around me, the political factions that are at play, the economic realities that are going on. I mean, you're straight up ignoring inflation. You're straight up ignoring all these things. You continue to push these party lines that aren't in touch with reality. And it seems like the response overall was that people were like, yeah, we're tired of being like a fucking mall with a, going out of business sign. We want an identifiable culture. The American people want an identifiable country. They want a functioning culture, functioning society. They're tired of having no new stories, no new art, no new ideas. They're tired of the culture just being stuck in the best thing they can offer is, like you're saying, a fucking flaming hot Cheeto Puerto Rican movie biopic. No one wants to see that. Who's that for? We have no ability to produce new ideas or anything that's exciting or can grab anyone at the mainstream level. And so, we're stuck with these. Instead of a new story or a new idea for a movie, it's just let's just make a movie about a fucking product that's on the market, and that's all that we can offer. And I think people are seeing through that in a meaningful way, at least enough to say, "Hey, I want something that seems like it might be real or offer an alternative vision of what a country actually is and can look like." And it kind of seems like they've been telling these kind of lies for so long that it's kind of part of like it's too late for them to back out on a lot of these things. And so, like you're saying, eventually they'll have someone that kind of stands up and offers a different take. It seems like doing that would be shooting yourself in the foot because you're saying, hey, I've been lying to you and I've been full of shit for the past 40 years or the past 20 years. It seems like they're in kind of too deep to be able to really drop some of these things. And it's going to take maybe just a cultural realignment and a quick shift from like, whatever Trump's able to do to even be able to like kind of reset the playing field to where they maybe don't have to make that they don't have to admit it themselves, maybe just move past some of those things.
Well, yeah,
and this is
Dems will have to move to the right on some issues, whether they like it or not. The problem is can they shut up the loudest, most annoying facets of their coalition that they've built up for 10, 15 years?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the real question. And I mean, I noticed this little weird pot shot that was taken, and I think you guys talked about it on one of your post-election episodes that I listened to. That like I think it was like a day after the election, Bernie Sanders just sent out like some press release where it's just like, well, the Democrats failed again. And it's just like, oh man, like preach to me like the 80-something-year-old Jewish billionaire you are. I love it so much.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, he has a valid point to some extent that it's just like, listen, you guys have failed again to run a campaign on economic issues. And I mean, okay, Bernie, you're a one-trick pony, and I get it, and that's fair, and it's correct. I mean, the Democrats didn't focus on anything that relates to my bottom line. And instead, what I saw was a administration that lied about unemployment stats, lied about how crime was down, emptied the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and has not done anything to refill it, and has fundamentally made it impossible for me to go outside and to not see, the product of their cultural revolution all over the country. It doesn't matter where you live; it's all present and it's all online. This election would not have played out the way that it did had not Elon Musk bought Twitter, and it would not have played out the way that it did unless he was doing things the Democrats do, like, I don't know, convince people to vote with money or to bust voters with his PAC money. Like, it's so crazy that someone who actually knows how to play the game is, of course, not a traditional Republican and a former Democrat. And but the Dems will have to move to the right on a lot of issues, I think, to some extent, or they're just going to have to silently. And I think that this is why 2028 you will have a white guy with, I guess, a woman VP candidate, I think.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's just going to have to happen. And to be honest, it will be a white guy from the middle of the country. I guarantee you that Andy Bashir will be a very well-known name come the 2028 Democratic primary. He will be well-known. I think that they realized, we can't get Texas, but we can probably get some part of Appalachia, and we can really start fracturing the red, wall inside of the middle of the country. So I think that that's something to seriously consider, but also that as long as Democrats continue to focus on keeping this great, big, perpetual machine, the cycle of cheap immigrants, cheap labor, focus on product, and not build anything, like COH was saying, the culture has been fundamentally stuck. And you want a good example of how stuck the culture is? And this is a terrible example, but I think it's one that holds up very well, is if you were to load up Grand Theft Auto 5 today and play the campaign mode and see the culture that it's lambasting, all that it's missing is a couple of extra gay pride flags, and that culture is fundamentally the same. Minus the just trans rights or whatever, the whole social media stuff, the whole Californian culture that's being made fun of in that game is still present today. We have not advanced past that. We can't make anything new. Instead, we've decided to focus on the ugliness of it. And our culture war is just one aspect of geopolitics that people aren't really paying attention to, because where does a lot of this DEI funding come from? Where does all this ESG funding come from? Especially video games, since we're talking about this sort of stuff, would be, it comes a lot from China, more than any other country on earth, and they have no problem influencing our cultural and video game outputs, because they know that this stuff sucks and it demoralizes a country and it makes things more difficult. Because if you're a homogenous country like the Chinese are, for all intents and purposes, and you look at the United States, how do I disrupt things and demoralize it and make it impossible for people to do it? Well, clearly, through the culture. Because it's if America ever wanted to go to war with China or with any other place, and it's we need to put a draft in. Well, sorry, you're going to have the draft riots in the 1860s in New York look like child's play when vast swaths of the country, particularly along ethnic lines, say, well, fuck that. I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. I didn't sign up for that, because there's no shared culture. There's no identity. There's no nothing. And the identity that America once had, and for a good chunk of the country still believes in, has been so villainized and has been so repudiated by all left-wing institutions. You are functionally trying to start from scratch, while the right wing or middle America has kind of got this withered stump that's this was what we once had. Could you pour some blood into this and we could be something great again? And that's the fundamental divide right here, is that one side, it's the old joke that America is a corpse and it's got maggots in it. The Democrats are rooting for the maggots and Republicans are rooting for the corpse. I mean, that's kind of where you're at. And the question is can you bring anything to life out of this, or can he be saved? And that's the fundamental question of our time. We've had an unprecedented wave of immigration over the last 25 years that has changed the makeup of the country radically faster than any other point in time in our American history. And that you have to ask yourself the question, what is the country going to be? And that raises an important question, because regardless of how the demographics are changing, the electorate is still overwhelmingly white, at least for the next couple of election cycles. And that's going to have to play a role in how politics are done. But also that if you want America to be dynamic or innovative or creative again, culturally, economically, technologically, strategically, you actually have to be unburdened by what has been, which means you have to undo the shackles of every progressive orthodoxy, because all those progressive orthodoxies has told the most creative, the most innovative, the most industrial, the most hardworking people in this country, you're not wanted, and we will either automate you away or we will fundamentally replace you.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing one of the things that's the most exciting to me about this kind of new emerging thing is like there's an energy behind it that it's like wanting to create maybe not a new vision of American culture, but kind of embolden American culture. And like some of the things that Trump is talking about specifically in his new policy videos, he's even talking about like he wants to bring back world fairs. He wants to establish 5 to 10 new great American cities with a great architects building them. Now, whether or not that's a real thing that could actually happen, it seems to be kind of like a little bit of like a renaissance, to like a cultural renaissance, or it could be the beginning of a cultural renaissance where it's like, let's try to make something beautiful and make something real and make something at the very least just fucking identifiable. And to me, I think that's something that's really interesting for me, because like as an artist, that's kind of primarily what I try to focus on, is like trying to create something that's real and something that can like root people into their current life and tie people together in some meaningful way. And it kind of seems that like a lot of the election was a repudiation of this idea that like where anything can be anything, we're like part of this global open society. That's what we should be voting for, not really voting for our individual purposes and not voting for our culture, not voting for our country. And I think that I mean people by and large spoke out against that. And I think that there is an energy, and I think that it's possible to create something that is a more robust culture that, and for the future. I think it's necessary if we're going to be able to maintain any semblance of civilization. I do think that that's kind of like the task at hand, like you're saying, is like how do we do that? But I think that it seems that like the ground is being sowed for that in a more meaningful way than it seems to have been in the past several decades.
Well, and so I've got a question there, which is, this is kind of zooming in a little bit to something a little more particular, which is I've felt this really big vibe shift since Trump won, where there like there's been, don't get me wrong, there's been some fun meltdowns to watch for sure, right? Every election night, I always tune into like MSNBC. I think we did CBS this time. I don't fucking know, but
ABC.
But yeah, like it's right, chef's kiss. There's been little things, like there hasn't been any rioting. There hasn't been, or at least not to a degree where it's really, popping into our bubbles here. And I wonder if that is an indication of something that's really changed, right? Or if there's kind of a hibernation mode going on right now in kind of the organizational networks, civil society kind of organizations that make up the left that are kind of storing energy for closer to inauguration season. You know what I'm saying? Like are we actually seeing a kind of change like you're talking about, or are we just kind of saving calories for a big blowout, in a month or two from now?
Well, I think that's no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm hoping that I think it's a little bit of both to be realistic, but I'm hoping that it's more so like they just don't have quite as much steam right now. But yeah, go ahead and say, you just give your piece, Prudentialist. You're the guest.
Oh, well, thanks. I think it's both, like what COH was saying, because we saw immediately after the election in 2016, you had Google, you had academia, you had the media, basically all realizing, oh shit, our thumbs were not on the scale as much as we thought it should have been. This obviously shouldn't have happened. I think you had the CEO of Google at the time literally say, we will never let this happen again. And clearly, they succeeded in 2020 for all intents and purposes. I know, right? Like, what strong language! Wow. But on top of that, you haven't seen that yet, And I think to some extent it has a lot to do with just a general vibe of exhaustion. Like, oh my God, like Rachel Levine, who gives a shit? Or like that bald, like nuclear waste tranny guy who stole purses and things from airports. Like, can we get the fuck over this? Like, there's this general like fatigue. It's just like, man, I know everything you're saying is bullshit, and we gotta like cater to these people's like weird, sick, twisted fantasies a la Kanye West, but it's just like, this is not working for us, and we gotta do something about it. And clearly, I think that, you know, on one hand, yeah, there has been a vibe shift where quite a bit of money has shifted toward the Trump and Elon and all that jazz. But I think at the same time that the real battles are going to come once Trump starts to move in the direction that he wants to with respects to his administration. Because again, he doesn't have to run for re-election. Yeah. He's got 4 years to do whatever he wants, and he doesn't have to think about how is this going to affect him in the voting, you know, at the voting booth next.
But he does
November.
Think about his image and his legacy long term, which I think is like one of his strengths, and in this instance, maybe one of his flaws.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that Trump has always been very image conscientious, and I think that he has a lot of goodwill right now between getting shot at twice, you know, getting nicked in the ear, and just coming out and say, like, listen, I represent America. I don't represent anything else. I mean, he is, for all intents and purposes, an American avatar. That he is this sort of, and he's the only one who can do it, really. I mean, my friend Morgoth's review, he wrote this fantastic essay about, you know, the third act of Donald Trump, which is that, you know, he is the only person who can be like Rocky and come back, you know, this great act and this great fight comeback and win. And it narratively, like on this like national story of the United States, it only makes sense that he comes back and that he finishes the job and that he triumphs over evil. So like on a meta narrative, it's like, yeah, this feels really good. And it's like, let the story play out. But on the other hand, I know that every single person that has, you know, called him a fascist and has been spending all this time, like Jennifer Rubin with the New York Times or wherever she works, and she's like, it's 1933. And it's just like, no, it's not. It's not. Right. And I'm so tired of, you know, all of this hauntology of World War II. The post-war consensus has its own issues that need to be taken care of and fixed and resolved and revised. But overall, like, we are haunted and by extension ruled by the ghosts of Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. And really, out of all of them, we're ruled by Hitler by nature of how the left screeches about him every 5 minutes, despite the fact that we are closer to having the economic 5-year plans and things like that of Stalin than anything else in this country. And I would know because I work in fucking government and I do 5-year plans all the time. And I think to myself, wow, Stalin would be so proud of the United States in 2024 if he were still around. And all of these things play out. And so it's a question of, okay, they know right now that no one listens to Rachel Maddow. Cenk Uygur and all the rest of them, it's only funny to watch the super chats roll in as they all hit on Anna Kasparian. Pac-Man has lost a lot of, you know, paid subscribers. All of BreadTube is functionally dead. I mean, good for Vouch for losing some fucking weight. And then on top of all of that, like, you know, and it's like, oh, even your best guys like Hassan Piker and Destiny. Well, one of those is like a cum-eating cuckold, and the other one is just like a preppy, you know, chip on his shoulder kind of like douchebag. And so it's like all of the leftist media heroes of the last 10 years are not relevant to the degree that they were. I mean, old man gigachat.jpg is just like, remember ContraPoints? Remember Philosophy too?
Yes.
All the people that would troon out for the sake of $8 million. They're not relevant anymore. And if they were relevant, I would be hearing them a lot more, and my friend Dave the Distributist would still be debating them because he's got a habit. But it illustrates, to me, it illustrates that the culture stuff, there is a general degree of exhaustion. It's like that fatigue. It was like, stop anti-Asian Pacific Islander hate. And it's like, well, I'm getting really tired as a white guy being blamed for when every NYPD like camera photo is some black guy beating the shit out of a Korean woman. Like, come on. And I'm a little tired of the same shtick over and over, but I know that all of the fights are going to happen in the courts. They're going to happen in lawfare. They're going to happen in the bureaucracies. And so we as the American people are going to be a lot more divorced from what's actually happening on the ground, because it's not going to be as drip-fed media to us. We're going to be whipped up into a frenzy all the time. Now, that's subject to change once he gets inaugurated, but I do think that the money, the energy, and the effort is going to be spent doing everything that they can to derail him from inside the House, rather than giving the appearance that he is an unwanted dictator or something like that.
I tend to agree with you, and I think it's a bummer because that means that the drama and the story has been so romantic up until this point. Like you said, the Rocky thing. I think I just saw a clip the other day of Stallone like introducing Trump.
Yeah, he did.
And then, no, it goes super hard. It rocks, dude. And just there's something very romantic about the arc that has happened. I think I said that right after the election. I was like, man, this feels like the kind of the conclusion. I mean, in a way, it's not over. This feels like the conclusion of like an extremely long story arc, right? Like 2020 wasn't even anything, right? This was the next one.
This is the beautiful thing about like fiction, is that Trump got elected and every political TV show went to shit. You know, Veep went to shit. House of Cards went to shit. Every show about politics was awful, just awful, because what was happening on your reality TV and Netflix and everything, they could not write anything better than what was happening on your screen right now. Like, it was a fucking Seinfeld episode to talk about Covfefe for like a week. It's just you can't make that shit up. Like, reality was better than anything that could be written in the writer's room of HBO. And even HBO doesn't have the stand that it once did, because Game of Thrones shat the bed, Barry is over, all these shows are kind of like dead in the water. Now there's a million different streaming platforms and a million different like gay shows that you can watch that we were just talking about earlier. And so there's no uniform culture of what keeps everyone focused except politics. That is the only thing that has us all glued to our phones and our TV screens. It's like, what's going to happen next?
Well, and specifically Trump. Like, Trump is the main character. Trump is the main character of the story right now. And
you should edit that Will Wood song, "I Am the Main Character," in post when you say that.
Oh, yeah.
It is amazing talking to, bless their hearts, the normie libs in my life that I care for deeply, who are completely separated from any actual awareness of like what Trump is actually doing, right? If you talk to a lib, about just basic stuff that's not even really particularly controversial, like Trump is just very funny. Trump is very funny. Trump has rallies where he's kind of just doing a set, right? They're in a sealed chamber, not able to even pay attention to that, right? They're seeing him like bounced off of like 16 different mirrors after it's already been kind of pre-digested. I think that's very interesting, and I think that speaks to I don't even necessarily really have a point I'm making with that, but just it speaks to that, like it feels like there is a moment going on, and that there is like the real story, to the point you said, is what's actually playing out IRL, and like it's such a potent truth in that that people are just simply being separated from it completely, right? I had friends of mine the other day, like unironically, this is actually a funny story, and I don't want to harp on it too much because in case anyone listens to it, I don't want to be a bully, but
fuck Slav's
I had friends. I do have friends, believe it or not. I had normie friends the other day unironically tell me that Trump did not get shot and that he just the whole he fell and clipped his ear on the podium thing. And I'm one of these people where I of course I want to maintain friendships, and I practically have to code switch around normie friends. And so, with one hand tied behind my back, I kind of, okay, buddy. And then I basically came back with like the other half of our friend group who all voted for Trump and just kind of systematically bullied these people out of ever talking about politics ever again. And as a side note, that felt really good, but it was interesting. It was really interesting because, the reality of what happened in the first assassination attempt, like these, like a huge portion of the population has just been completely protected from that.
Oh yeah.
Like, I don't know that these people have even seen the picture with the flag and the fist in the air. I don't know that they even are aware of its existence. And I you know, if you had told me this even 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have believed that, because again, it's hard for me to fully grasp just how shattered the culture is, like how
Mm-hmm.
far from a monoculture in some ways, I guess, we are. That like there's just this amazing thing to it, this amazing arc that's going on. That like libs and normies are like being just completely protected from, like earmuffs over them. It's wild to me.
The funny thing to me with that is like, I mean, I've heard people, of course, say, I mean, he wasn't even shot. He just like nicked his ear with a razor, or he hit his ear and pulled a bullet,
Embarrassing.
whatever. The funny thing to me is, what the fuck does that matter? Like, if you're going to admit that there were real bullets shot in his direction, that they killed two people behind him, that it's like a real thing. What difference does it make if it hit his ear or if it didn't and he fell down? Either way, he was in extreme risk of life-ending injury, and like they took an attempt out on his life. That doesn't seem that like that's not a meaningful discussion to even have in the first place. Even if I wanted to play ball and some sort of conspiratorial, notions around the assassination attempt, but like the real conspiracy around the assassination attempt is how the fuck did this kid walk around with a rangefinder? How the fuck did this kid get on top of a roof with no one seeing him and no one getting him, when all the people in the crowd are yelling about him being up there? He's yelling that he's got a gun. That's like the real conspiracy, and that is, like you're saying, that's not even something that's even probably shown in any capacity to these people, because of the different media worldview that they hold, and the different kind of crystal or chrysalis or echo chamber or whatever that they find themselves in.
Yeah, I mean, we fundamentally have found out of this election, and I mean, also just since 2016, really, it's just been fundamentally there are two Americas. And I don't mean that just along, say, like racial lines or anything like that. I just mean pure media. I mean, the media ecosystems, one, they're highly individualized. They're highly meant to, they reify and reiterate what you're already into. They want to make sure that you are already in the bubble that you are already in. They don't want you to really break containment. And this is just not just for Twitter or even pre-Elon Twitter. It's also with YouTube. It's with all forms of social media. And so essentially, you are now going to be drip fed the content that is going to be fitting to your worldview. And it, just like pornography, will force you to be craving more and more extremist content. The one thing that libs were right about during the whole like 2015, 2017 era was there was a libertarian to alt-right pipeline, and it worked really fucking well. And of course, the whole adpocalypse thing came, and they started throttling, and a lot of channels that I know just suddenly kind of either aren't on YouTube anymore, they got throttled to existence, and their channel growth has been non-existent for 5 years. On top of that, you also have the issue of left-wing media. Like, yes, I saw a lot of people go apeshit saying that the assassination attempt wasn't real, that it was all faked. Like, look at his ear, there's nothing really wrong with it. Like, they were even doing this when like he went on Joe Rogan. It's like, see, look at his ear, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it was a squib, like that guy was faked or whatever. It was a crisis actor, and it's like, whoa. And then all the like pointing out hypocrisy conservators are like, whoa, you do that, you might get sued for like $1 trillion like Alex Jones. And it's like, well, no, they're not. Let's not kid ourselves. But
Right,
it raises the fundamental point that America is successfully divided on algorithmic lines, and that informs your politics alongside what you consume media-wise, but also who you associate with, what you identify as, all those things fundamentally will hit you, because that is what informs your Weltanschauung, your worldview, your identity, your essence of all these things. And because of that, the question is going to be, well, how do you reconcile those two things? I do think to a large extent there will be sort of this renewed consensus building as Trump and his, like, I mean, you saw this already with like NFL players, golfers, they're doing the little Trump YMCA dance. It's like, cool, white people get to express themselves normally again. But on top of that, it's it's like it's like the nice like old white guy dance. It's lovely. Yeah. But on top of that, it's the fundamental point that America has, I guess, a culture, or at least an exit ramp, where someone wants to build something and someone wants to make things cool again. And I know, as gaudy as Trump might be in sometimes, I know the guy that brought a huge fucking order of McDonald's to welcome in people into the White House. I know that guy is going to do his best, and he's already announced it with his campaign, policy announcement videos and such, that what he wants to do for America's 250th birthday.
God,
I know,
yes.
and he gets to host like the Olympics, during this administration, and he gets to do all this other cool shit. And it's just like, actually, America's going to be really a fucking cool place to be, or it feels like it's going to be. But I also know that there are a lot of people that don't want that to happen. And it raises significant concerns as to what politics will look like, because that is the only thing that brings us all together right now. It's not a hit TV show. It's not celebrity gossip. And even when it is celebrity gossip, it's usually generated by shit posters on the internet. Like, let's not all forget that a couple of guys managed to meme into Vanity Fair and Hollywood Today talking about how Margot Robbie is fucking mid. Like, let's you want to blast from the past, there's one of them. And so it just illustrates that, like, actually, this is where culture is happening. It is an explicitly online culture generating machine. And in doing so, this creation engine, this polemical engine, is going to be what sort of drives things forward. Does that mean that we're going to see some ridiculous things happen? Yeah, like the whole Margot Robbie thing being mid. I mean, that's hilarious. But at the same time, I mean, that's why, like, on a narrative level, yes, like, Trump's the guy. This is where things are going to go. But at the same time, there are still some very, very real things that have to get taken care of. I mean, there's still the war in Israel and Gaza and Palestine. There's still the issues in Ukraine, and there's the ongoing rising tensions with China, Taiwan, and the whole Asian Pacific region that has really, oriented America versus China in that respect. And these are all very real problems. America still fundamentally lacks sovereignty on a financial level. It fundamentally lacks sovereignty when it comes to immigration, because let's face it, even if we did want to do deportations, the next day that a lot of police officers or a lot of reservists are going to get fucking chainsawed like it's a fucking Lively cartel video, because that's how it's going to be. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be bloody. It's going to be violent. And so, on a narrative level, it feels great, because it's like, oh, the 60s are over. This great political revolutionary spirit has been crushed. It's like 1968. It's like, damn it, fuck you hippies. Richard Nixon's my guy. And then all of a sudden, what happens in the 1970s? The Days of Rage, our own Age of Lead might be coming in soon. There will be, all kinds of issues that raise the question. So everyone is waiting with very much bated breath. Okay, he got it. What happens next?
I was actually going to bring up the kind of geopolitical ramifications of Trump's second term and what you kind of think that will look like, because I know that the news of the past couple of days with the Ukraine thing is that things are ramping up over there, as Biden and other UN, like France and other prime ministers, have expressed that they are no longer concerned with them using long distance missiles, and so they've kind of now allowed them to start using U.S. supplied long distance missiles to attack Russia, and that seems like it's a pretty large, change of pace as far as speeding up and heating up in that conflict. And I was kind of wondering what you think that'll look like, because it kind of seems like right now, like after the election, I even read this article. I think it was maybe the Washington Post or something like that, and they were saying that post the November 5th election, like things are moving very quickly in the Ukraine front as far as the Biden administration. And I was wondering kind of what do you see that? Do you see them actually being able to slow that down in any capacity with Trump's second term? Because I know that was something that at least J.D. Vance was very keen on with the Ukraine conflict.
Well, I know that Trump had campaigned on wanting to end the war as soon as humanly possible, and he would say he would do it in 24 hours. I mean, I doubt that that's going to happen. It does seem that both France, Britain, and the United States have sort of given the all clear that we need to use long-range missiles and to strike deeper into Russian territory. And I'm sure that this has already happened and that it hasn't been reported on as much, but doing so now is a lame duck presidency. And of course, Biden's not really at the dashboard of
No,
the
of
shit.
course not. No,
So which raises it even more
somewhere.
No, I mean, it's terrifying, right? That unnamed bureaucrats and unnamed members of the State Department and DOD are running the country and are waging a war And I mean, America is functionally on autopilot right now, which is
Yeah.
even super terrifying. As the passengers in this like 747 that's about to like fucking crash or something,
Yeah, I
you
feel
know,
like
like
we're on Flight
whoop, whoop,
93 or
that's the
something.
sound of the terrain, and it's like, yeah, we're all gonna crash.
Yeah.
And so, I think, however, I think that these these NATO nations, U.S., U.K., France, whatever, they know that Trump's going in and that he's going to try his best to bring the war to an end, and that billions have been spent, and we have seen warfare fundamentally change.
Mm-hmm.
This is a side note, but I think that it's sort of important to consider. On Twitter and on other social media websites, you can watch people cheer. For who in the comfort of their own bedroom or their phone or wherever, on the shitter, watching people make the sign of the cross before they get blown up
Wow.
by a drone, or Ukrainian or Russian, and cheer for it,
That's
and
crazy.
and it's truly dehumanizing
Mm-hmm.
on a scale in which I don't think any previous conflict really matches that. But for us Americans, we don't really think anything about it.
Yeah.
My church had a picnic barbecue a couple weeks ago, and someone brought a drone to do some aerial photo, to get some nice footage of the church. And I'm looking up at it, and all the kids are sort of like in awe about it because they think it's a neat toy, a neat
Yeah.
gimmick. And I'm looking up and I'm thinking, how many countless thousands of people have been fucking slaughtered by that thing?
Yes,
And
their
the
last
last thing
flight.
that is on their mind is God before
Mm-hmm.
it blows up in front of their faces and kills them. And so it was just this strange, like, I'm fundamentally aware of how how different war has changed. But
Yeah.
on top of that, I think they're doing this to try and get the best position of strength to negotiate. Anytime that you feel as if a war is coming to an end, or the traditional models of like the bargaining model of war, you usually go all out if you think that this might give you the best chance for leverage.
Mm.
Because, Trump is going to bring Zelensky and Putin to the table and trying to negotiate some kind of settlement and some end to the war. I think that Russia, given all of the money and blood and treasure that has been spent, and of course bringing in this coalition of like Chinese and the North Koreans and things
Yeah.
like that, illustrates that they've got a coalition. However you can say about it being strong or weak, I know that the war has not gone as much in their favor as they've wanted to, but they've probably gotten enough where they can keep the Crimean Peninsula,
Mm-hmm.
or at least that's going to be their mainstay. Is that we want to keep our 2014 territorial annexation, and that you can have a rump state or whatever, and we'll leave it at that, and we can have an exchange of population for whoever so wishes to live on the Russian side, who wants to live on the Ukrainian side. However, I know that the powers that be will not want that under any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Of course, the Russia stuff from 2016 will come back in full force with this conflict. And so the risk for escalation and the security dilemma still remain at an all-time high. I mean, we did see the Russians test an intermediate range ballistic missile that had multiple reentry vehicle for warheads.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, I think it was just a dry fire. I don't think it had actual conventional explosives on it. But I mean, again, that's you can say, oh well, like they're giving you the final warning, the red line that they've been saying that they're always going to go for. But I find it strange on a cultural and I guess on a policy level as well that my parents were raised with things like Red Dawn or The Day After or When the Wind Blows or Threads.
Mm-hmm.
These terrifying consequences of nuclear war and things like that. These things that we never want to see happen in America. And now that's gone from cultural memory. And
Oh
even
yeah.
for a large extent, the war on terror is gone from cultural memory. So we have really no conflict that is fresh in American minds. And instead, our idea of a war story is like Top Gun Maverick using no. I mean, you can giggle at that, but I mean, what is the Top Gun Maverick story? An aging military that is using equipment that's like 40 to 50 years old, and now it's up against technology that it isn't really equipped with to do. And so we have to bring the best of our old guys to come in, like the Gen X, like icons of the world, to do it. And so I think that's a very serious issue. That situation is liable to escalate, and of course they want it to escalate because that puts them in the best position to negotiate. At the same time, you have the serious issue with international trade. COVID proved that what is considered convenient is not very resilient or self-sufficient with supply lines and supply chains. So the Red Sea issue with the Houthis in Yemen is going to be a problem. And then, of course, you have everything to do with Asia and its trade war, because the Biden administration continued a lot of Trump's policies with respect to trade. And now this is on top of the fact that you have to deal with migration, that you have to deal with countless thousands of acres of land next to military installations and other vital strategic resources being monitored with Chinese, farms, quote unquote. And so America has to fundamentally retrench itself and have a foreign policy of restraint, which I hope is what will be the case. And I mean, the best guy that can do that, I think, is still Elbridge Colby, who runs the Marathon Institute. He worked with the Trump administration in his first term. And I think that he's one of the few smart realists on this planet that isn't like a kooky, like boomer lib like John J. Mearsheimer. People are like, well, Mearsheimer's like a Russian apologist. I'm like, this fucker voted for Bernie twice. Like, please, like, reassess where you're getting the stuff. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can criticize Mearsheimer for. His realism model is not 100% perfect, but it comes to show that these situations are very fraught. And I think that Trump is going to be, in this term, a very domestic policy president. More so than anything else. I think that he will look at Nixon and try and do this sort of peace with honor, and also put America in a position that it can retrench itself and push power abroad. Because right now, America is, sleeping behind the wheel. We are careening off of the guardrails, off a cliff. And that someone needs to take the wheel and get us back on the road. Because right now, as we stand logistically, our terms of production, Biden's administration has done a lot to try and retrench and bring things to build back in America. But as a report from McKinsey was talking about, we have a corporate culture that makes it very difficult to build things. We don't have the manpower and the human capital to build things like, semiconductor prefab plants. And we're trying to get places like the TSMC to come in. I think we're also looking at a Netherlands company. But also you kind of have to stabilize Ukraine, because the two largest companies in the world that produce most of the world's semiconductor grade neon are in Ukraine. And you have to take care of that. So I think that a lot of what Biden has continued from Trump will be continued from Biden to Trump again. And it's going to be a focus on retrenchment, negotiation, while at the same time seriously assessing where America's national weaknesses are, because the great power conflicts of the 21st century may have been started already, or, and the real terrifying factor is, everything we've seen in the last 10 years, from 2014 to today, is the equivalent of the Balkan conflicts of 1912, 1911, and 1913, where everyone thought this was just going to be small, isolated incidents. And then what happens the next year? World War I breaks out. And so I think that America and the rest of the world is very much on the precipice of much greater conflict. However, I do think that there will be a foreign policy of restraint, whilst looking to retrench and reindustrialize at home. That way, if America does get into a peer-to-peer conflict, it has the capabilities to produce and not be reliant on an international system that will cripple itself if war breaks out.
Well, one thing that's really interesting, you mentioned like shoring up Ukraine because of the neon supply, and I think that that's something that I was interested in, is the mineral aspect to a lot of this. It seems like a lot of the kind of conflict going on is like over minerals in order to, like you're saying, make superconductors and that sort of thing. And so then I think of also, I mean, I know I saw you had a post about, or I saw you had some writing about Helene and about North Carolina, and it made me wonder if you have heard any of the like conspiracy kind of theories or whatever about lithium and minerals in the Carolinas, about the geological surveys towards like harvesting and mining for those minerals, and kind of how maybe that kind of ties into this national production that you kind of speaking of, as far as reinvigorating our capabilities to produce energy, produce superconductors, produce the things that we need here with stateside, and how does that kind of factor into our ability to actually successfully kind of slow down some of this kind of rampant and global kind of war machine, because it seems like a lot of it is based upon securing resources abroad, and it seems as though if we can kind of tap into some of our resources at home, that would be one kind of front as far as eliminating our reliance upon that structure.
So, I mean, with respects to what I wrote about Helene, it was mainly about local government and funding sources in which these towns and things like that were affected by the hurricanes and flooding and all that can
Hmm.
rebuild.
Yes.
In real life, I am a bureaucrat. I work for a state government to some extent with respects to economic development and economic planning. I know all of my right wing economic friends are just like dying inside as I say that, but also that I try my best to ensure that towns get the money that they need for sewage treatment plants and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and I help facilitate those projects. And I'm a glorified PM, but for government, and I like what I do, and that's what I wrote about.
Hmm.
With respects to resources, yes, that does have to happen. I know that this is why Trump has talked about like the Alaskan, national wildlife stuff. I know that there's a lot of regulatory burdens that prevent us from mining or drilling and excavating these things. I think that those need to be lifted because America does have a great bounty of natural resources, but also that we rely on our partners in the Pacific,
Hmm.
Australia especially, and that is going to be a huge area of concern alongside. I think that outside of Ukraine, there's some. I think there's a Dutch, logistics and transistor company that I think that they're going to probably take a closer look at as well. But I mean, America just needs to reshore a lot of its manufacturing, industrially speaking,
Yeah.
whether that's the production of composite materials, whether that's the production of artillery. It has to happen because if not, you fundamentally lack the resources and materials to build a national defense that
Hmm.
is not reliant on outside infiltration, technology, espionage, etc. And that just has to happen as a basic bare bones defense necessity. I mean, realism dictates that you have to defend your local sovereignty before you can project power abroad. And right now, America needs to seriously consider how does it maintain its own sovereignty. That means capable of defense at home, weeding out bad actors, kicking out criminals, terrorists, illegal spies, espionage traitors, etc. So, I mean, America has a lot to do on the home front. And this is why I think that the one thing that Richard Haas, the former president of the Council of Foreign Relations and advisor to George W. Bush, said, and he said this in 2014, 10 years ago, foreign policy begins at home. And he's
Hmm.
fundamentally right about
Yeah.
that. And unless America is willing to do what is necessary to have a corporate culture that allows you to build, innovate, and not worry about the bullshit, and focuses on, little m meritocracy, getting the most qualified people to actually do the jobs that they're meant to do, and to actually let the, crazy guys with crazy ideas build things that
Hmm.
will be used.
A la
Um,
Elon Musk.
well, not just Musk, but I mean, like, just homegrown ingenuity.
Yeah.
I mean, the American like light transport vehicle that got our guys onto D-Day was built by some guys in Louisiana who were like, "Hey, we got this idea, we got these parts. Here's our design." The government was like, "Yes, we'll take hundreds of these." I think that there's that part of Americana that's still in this country that needs to
Hmm.
be brought back. And I mean, Musk, I think, is sort of this avatar for bringing it there.
Right.
And yeah, I agree, but I think that those are the big issues. Is that it's going to be a retrenchment, while at the same time, seriously looking at America's military internally and being like, okay, we're stretched thin, we have huge issues, and we need to be looking at every single lesson from Ukraine in that conflict as to how we are going to look at the next war. Because of course, drones will be part of it.
Oh yeah.
Hypersonics will be part of it. All these things will be part of it. And the real question then becomes, okay, how do we make ourselves a peer-to-peer power that can still maintain its superpower status and hegemonic status without seriously being threatened by one state or a coalition of states? And that's going to be the biggest challenge going forward. And this is why everyone's talking about multipolarity. This is why everyone's
Mm.
talking about the end of the unipolar moment, which to a large extent I would agree with. And so it just puts America in a very precarious position. And for all the issues that Trump has, I think that that's something that he will do well on, is
Definitely.
trying to get things back home and the engine running again.
Well, he seems like he's kind of uniquely primed, at least in the modern age, to kind of deal with this like more multipolar world because he seems like he's willing to actually sit down. And this is something that many of his detractors will point to as a flaw, but seems to me as an obvious strength. So he's willing to actually sit down with these, these leaders of these other places, and actually try to have discussions with them. He'll go and meet with Kim Jong Un. He'll go and sit down with Putin. He'll go and talk with Xi. He'll do these kind of things where it seems like that's kind of been off the table for at least the neo-lib kind of regimes that have been around. So I think that he's kind of uniquely primed to be able to from that perspective, kind of surf the waves of the new like multipolar moment. And I think that hopefully he does actually bring home a lot of these productive capabilities, because I think that's going to lead to, like I was talking about, a creative renaissance earlier. I think that's kind of part of it. It's making people make shit here again. And then you have a productive kind of renaissance where people are thinking, like you're saying, having innovative, ingenious kind of ideas. You're having inventors here again. We're making shit again, innovating. And I think that, like, I am very skeptical of Elon Musk in a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons. But that's the only kind of thing that, the only kind of grace I'm giving him mostly is that, like, he, I see why Trump likes him in a lot of ways, other than being kind of an effective political actor and also kind of being able to sway things with his purchase of X and everything, but also because he represents like maybe a kind of groundswell of new ideas. I don't like going to space, and I don't like putting people on Mars, and I don't like that shit. I hate that shit. But it is like it is new, innovative shit, and it is like trying to make something that's like stepping into the future. And to me, I think that's an exciting aspect of the whole thing. But I do, like, still in my heart, I'm like, I don't like this man. I don't like the like transhumanist kind of future space bullshit he's on.
I don't like the transhumanism part. I think that the space aspect is sort of not just a strategic necessity, but I think that it's going to just be part and parcel of whatever emerges out of the future. Because if not, like, it's just never going to happen. And I think that Musk is an autistically singular-minded man of, like, daddy's got to get to Mars, and he's going to take his harem with him, like it's fucking Heaven's Gate. But, except he's not going to kill himself, except he's just going to die on Mars. That's his plan. And that, and hell hath no fury, like we say like a woman scorn, but really like a father who has been wounded. And I mean, I think when he had said, my son is dead over all this transgender stuff, I mean, that was really clear and upfront, saying like, oh man, it's seriously time to like burn this fucker to the ground. Like, and I mean, he's clearly has, with the way that he's moved things politically. Now, I don't trust him either. I don't trust this Neuralink shit. I mean, I've told people time and time again, I'm not going to be a diehard trust the plan, Trump 2024 kind of person. I mean, I very much take what the psalmist says very seriously. Trust not in princes and the sons of men in whom there is no salvation. And I mean, I sing that at every divine liturgy in the antiphons and the beginning of the liturgy. Now, with that being said, I will be rooting for the good that he does, Trump in that camp, but I will be quick to criticize, because I know that regardless of what happens, Trump has bought me 4 years to get more money, get land, and figure out what the hell I'm going to do with the rest of my life, because God knows what comes after this post-Trump moment. And that's really all I can say is that I have successfully bought myself 4 years of breathing room / wiggle room. And what come may, I should be using this time as wisely as possible.
I think that's a good outlook to have on it. I'm kind of in the same spot. I think I have one kind of closing question for you, which is, you're talking about a post-Trump moment, and I wonder what do you think that looks like? I know we've got 4 years, and like you said, you don't really know, who knows what could come after it. But like, is there a possibility of maintaining the momentum and building on it? Do you think that it's just like, this is just 4 years that we've got, and then it's like, after that, like, the Dems are absolutely going to win? Is there an ability to not replace Trump, but continue on that moment and that energy, or do you think it dies with him? And how do you kind of weather that storm and try to ride that tide?
JD Vance will probably be the guy.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, because I mean, the New York Times had that great sort of like post-election interview, exit polling, where they asked all those guys, and a lot of people who voted for Trump that either voted for Biden in 2020 or didn't vote at all in previous elections were like, I don't like Trump, but JD Vance sounded clear, coherent. He made Republicans sound reasonable. And so, I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things that we can nitpick JD Vance about, but JD Vance is the perfect running mate, and was the perfect running mate. Sorry, that whole weird thing did not stick, because he opened his mouth. They did the podcasting tour, and that shit was so good. The whole strategy of go on podcasts, appear normal to men, because men listen to podcasts, like, that was genius. Like, whoever made that decision deserves a huge fucking raise.
It won a lot of my friends over that haven't ever voted before, that went out and voted for Trump Vance, specifically because of the Vance appearances on the podcast.
Same exact thing with a number of my friends too. Like, that last push on the podcast, on the dude circuit, basically, was extremely effective.
Oh yeah, and again, I think that that strategy won't go away anytime soon because we know it works, especially for a younger millennial man like JD Vance. And he is young. He does have a political future ahead of him. He will run for president in 2028. He will be seen as the heir apparent to the Trump movement and MACA and all that jazz. I think that his coalition and the Republican Party is going to be a very weird boat to be in because it's going to be a mix of wealthy venture capitalists and tech guys from Silicon Valley. There's going to be a lot of like rich, I guess like disaffected Jewish Democrats that have money to burn. And it's also going to have a huge influx of Indians, dot not feather, into the party. Whether it's Harmeet Dillon, Vivek Ramaswamy, JD Vance's fucking wife, like that. I mean, like the Anglosphere outside of America has already been recolonized and conquered, and it's like conservative politics by subcontinentals. Like you can look, you can see it happening in Britain. You can see it happening in parts of Australia, and you can see it happening in Canada, just north of us. And so, with that being said, like that's going to be a big chunk of the faction of these parties all vying for control of the levers of power. With, of course, a still pretty steady white and Latino voter base that are realizing that actually the issues that speak to white people speak to everybody, and that's going to be part of it. But as for this like post-Trump moment, I think that it's going to have to focus on dynamism and being innovative because, again, we've had a stuck culture for decades.
Yeah.
And that what really like the death knell for that culture was Barack Obama and was Joe Biden's continuation of that culture and of that progressivism. And everyone kind of realized, oh, everything sucks. And whoever can bring dynamism back to it. And I mean, Trump is the embodiment of American dynamism.
Yeah.
TV shows, cameos, a billionaire, a mogul, a man who can build and make deals and is known as the pinnacle in the 90s and 80s. This is the standard of the American like business premier. Like this is who you want to fucking be. And so the question becomes, well, who can succeed to that? Well, I think for all these questions about the Rust Belt or Middle America or the guys that Bernie Sanders really appealed to, JD Vance will be the heir apparent to that.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole hillbilly elegy thing and now being the vice president of the United States and a mom who's like nearly 10 years recovered from addiction, you can't ask for a better mix of qualities in a candidate. Now, on top of all of that, I think that he will inherit what comes next. I think that that's something for sure that you can look at. And the post-Trump moment will also see Democrats try to appeal to whites again. Yeah. And it will do it with someone like Andy Beshear. I don't think it'll be Gavin Newsom. I think it'll be Andy Beshear. The more you look at Gavin Newsom and the way he talks, he is like Kamala Harris, but white and like fucking Patrick Bateman. I feel like every time I see him speak with those like pearly white veneers, he's going to put on a raincoat and fucking axe me. And so... And again, like the debates and the podcast scene illustrates a lot of these guys on the Democrat side have no fucking charisma. Instead, they're all wealthy bureaucrats that just know how to finagle their political machines really well. Like, is J.D. Pritzker going to run for president? I don't know, probably not. Like, that dude's like the face of the transgender industrial complex. He should be hung. But like, I don't see him ever being successful enough to go on like a podcast circuit. You know,
no, dude.
He's
a fucking
weirdo. That guy looks like a little freak, dude. He looks like a character from fucking Meet the Feebles, dude. I don't want to see that guy.
He's absolutely weirdo.
and also like the age of like the Ron DeSantis policy wonk Mitt Romney types is gone as well. Like honestly, if Ron DeSantis were the candidate, one, Kamala Harris would have won the election, and two, like he has zero charisma. He has negative charisma. Ron DeSantis would have gone on the fucking Caller Daddy podcast and an effort to appeal to female voters. It would have been awful. And so thank
Ron
God
Ron DeSantis was basically Trump's Elizabeth Warren. Like what Warren was to Bernie.
Yeah.
Just send him on SNL and have him dance around too.
Oh man. Crazy stuff. But I mean, I think that that's where the future will lie. And I mean, who knows? This all can age like fine wine, or this can age like milk. We will only know in the coming months and years ahead. But I will say that for this moment that they can say whatever about nitpicking about mandates, but Trump has been given one. And you can talk about the votes or whatever, but I mean, the people who actually give a shit about America and aren't here to be parasites voted for something that says, you know what, dynamism is better, this country sucks, and everything that has gone into the shitter means we need to change course. Now, there are plenty of things wrong with Donald Trump. There are plenty of things that you can criticize him for. It is a real shame that someone like Trump has gotten the political loyalty and the fanfare that he's gotten, because Americans deserve so much better.
Yeah.
But perhaps, you know, Joseph de Maistre is right and people get the government that they deserve. But I pray to our God that at the end of it all, we will find a meaningful way forward that will try and tackle these crises of meanings. And because right now, not only are we speciating on an algorithmic and racial and technological lines on our politics, but we are going to have to deal with the fact that all these issues that people quote unquote talk about, like mental health or what's wrong with young men or what's wrong with young women, unless you provide a meaningful answer to that, then things will only continue to deteriorate and get worse. And for all intents and purposes, at least for Trump and at least for the people around Trump, it offers an alternative that progressives can't offer. To close it all out on this question, you know, you look at Vaush, you look at Destiny, you look at all the lefty media types of the last 10 years. You have to ask yourself, what was the role model for straight men to follow? There wasn't one that didn't mean that didn't include pruning out, being a cuckold, or looking like a twink. Because I'm sorry, you know, the election results are in, and Harry Sisson still looks like a faggot. You know, like, and that's not going to change.
Yeah.
And so if I'm a young guy who has been told his entire life, and like I was in college when the Dear Colleague letter, I came into college right after the Dear Colleague letter came out, and the destruction of fraternities, male-only spaces, everything like that. And being told that as a white guy, I'm the root of all evil, I'm worse than the devil, I'm Hitler, da-da-da-da-da. It makes you want to say, you're number one with my middle finger, and to vote for Trump again.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I voted for him 6 times, every primary election and every presidential election that he's been on the ticket. And I'm not ashamed to say it, and I don't regret my votes. Because at the end of it all, it was either a side that wants me dead or wanted me to go die in some foreign war, or a guy that said, hey, you matter, why don't you come on board and we'll make things great again?
Yeah.
And it's the simplest answer is the side that wins is usually going to be the side that has the sales pitch. Why settle when you can be better? And Americans at the ballot box on November 5th of 2024 said, I would like things to be better, please. And they voted for Trump.
God bless. I hope they get better. I think that's all that we can hope for. We hope and pray for it. Even if there are things that come along that maybe I offer some criticism on, I do really hope that he's able to get good, solid things done for our country, and that it can hopefully spark some level of, a ground swelling of innovation and new ideas and new cultural products. And on that front, I would love sometime to have both you and Gio on to discuss culture, discuss the newer, exciting
Well, you
culture.
guys can come on the Digital Archipelago anytime you want.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, man. Well, Prude.
Oh, that would be a fucking blast.
Thank you for coming on. We're at almost 2 hours now, so we can probably wrap up here. I think it was a great discussion. Slav, do you have anything before we leave?
No, that was awesome. I want to keep it short and brief just because that was such a fucking strong end note that you gave us there that I don't want to undercut it. But I'm really excited. Well, I'm about to undercut it anyways. Really excited to see what even 2 months from now looks like, and just revisiting this episode, listening to it again, and just kind of seeing what it's going to be a really crazy couple of months. Those first couple months of the administration, and so I'm really excited and excited to continue the conversation going forward.
Well, Prudentialist, plug your things before we wrap up, so that people know where to find you.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for having me on. It's kind of funny how this conversation went, because I jokingly tell my friends, I said, "Oh, these are my favorite like liberal lefty types to talk to," and this was kind of a way more amicable conversation. It's like, oh no, either I've gone soft or something has radically changed with my left of center friends that I just really I've lost space with reality. But no, so again, as always, thank you so much for having me on. You can find all of my work at findmyfriends, FRENS.net. patreon.com/the Prudentialist. That's where all my links are. It's like a right-wing link tree where I'm not going to get canceled because my friend runs it. But I am on YouTube, I'm on Twitter and Substack. Just look for the lovely amphibian that is best associated with my namesake online. I would highly recommend that if you want to know a little more about these like right-wing infighting in the Republican Party of the past, I have a video called New Right Fights with my good friend Ryan Turnipseed. We go into the history of these back and forth movements about what is the old right, what was the new right of Buckley, what is the new right of like, J.D. Vance and Curtis Yarvin, for those who are interested. On top of that, I host a weekly show with my good friend Gio Panicetti called The Digital Archipelago. We cover culture, literature, political philosophy, and the news, along with all sorts of online memes and shitposts to go with it. That's usually every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, live. It's on his channel as well as mine. And most of the time you can find my work in either The Blaze, or I'm usually a co-host or returning guest on Oren McIntyre's show on that lens. I'm always available for conversation. I don't mind talking to just about anybody, like you two fine gentlemen. So again, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Hey, we'll have a good rest of your week coming up, and we hope to touch base soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
These people are sick.
This is obviously a very, very sick individual.
It's been
These
like
people
months,
are the
I can't
sickest
listen
of
to
them
the
all.
song without
These
laughing
people
still.
are sick. They are sick, and you better get used to hearing it.
So true.
These people are sick.